All right, what's up, fanatics? It is we're getting into the heat of summer, and we are going to talk a lot of football, of course, here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network. And this is episode number 1 of a brand new type of summer series where we are going to take an in-depth look at the Iowa State football program as we head into the 2024 season, where everyone in that building spent a lot of time there in the last couple of weeks. Hey, their goal is a Big 12 championship, and we're going to hear about that. We're going to hear from most coaches, I think, on the coaching staff here in the coming months, a handful of players. Today's episode to start things off is with Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell. Just a heads up, we are doing a lot of like big picture stuff. I'm going to get Matt again at the middle or end of July as camp is approaching, where we'll do a lot more roster stuff with him. But we'll do a ton of roster stuff with these assistant coaches. We're going to have both coordinators and, of course, some players as well. We couldn't do what we do here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network without great sponsors. And your football summer series is going to be presented by 4 great companies. We'll tell you about them all over the next couple of months, but a longtime partner of mine, the Fairway Meat Market in Ames. I go here, God's honest truth, what I do during football season, I drop off my camper at the RV lot and I go straight to the Fairway Meat Market. This place is sweet. It's right where, it's where the old Wallabies used to be, right in that old area in Ames. This place is absolutely phenomenal. Like, they got stuff there at the Fairway Meat Market that I didn't even know existed. And I'm always whipping up cool stuff at my camper on Friday nights at the RV lot in Ames. Couldn't do anything we do here on Cyclone Fanatic without our friends at Fairway Meat and Grocery. Other friends I would like to thank are my buddies over at Central States Roofing. They came on board with us earlier this year. Diehard Iowa State fans, these guys are. Hey, and right now they are working a lot on roof leaks. We've all had I've had a flooded basement. I was literally at my daughter's preschool graduation getting water dripped on me. It was the same day my basement flooded, Aiden. It was being dripped all over me. And I thought to myself, they need my friends at Central States Roofing. They do all sorts of different project sizes, from the Iowa State Stark Performance Center, Hilton Coliseum. A lot of re-roofs and new constructions. They do it all. Central States Roofing, commercial roofing in Central Iowa. Really appreciate their sponsorship of what we are doing. I got a couple other sponsors we'll tell you about here in just a little bit, but let's get started. Let's hear from Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell. Did this interview on Monday, June 3rd. These conversations are all pretty evergreen, so if you're listening later, there's not going to be any news to come with this. These are designed for you to be able to listen to at your leisure all summer long here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network. All right, Coach. Well, first of all, thanks for having us up here. Look, we have cameras now. We've grown up.
Grown up a ton. Yeah, it's impressive.
I used to interview you just like a digital voice recorder.
Me and you, one-on-one. I know, simpler times.
It was. How are you? How's the summer going?
Yeah, well, we're at the early stages of it, but, just a really exciting time. I think there's just such a good energy around, our coaching staff and this team. And, it's an exciting time. And honestly, just like I said, I think the word's energy. There's a lot of really positive energy around it, everything that's going on. And I think everybody hears like there's an excitement. You're sprinting to the office every day right now, and that's fun.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting time. Just with everything going on around the sport, I don't want to lose track of. I have to be honest. I think that I'm probably guilty of paying too much attention to all that stuff, and I'm kind of now getting into football mode.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Just because there's been so many things just changing in the landscape, and I'm really curious because I know you're such a football guy and you love coaching and the development aspect. What about all of this has kept you not just at Iowa State, but just even in this business throughout all of it?
Well, I think we're probably isolated. We're probably an anomaly here a little bit. That it's so different here. We couldn't win that way anyways.
Yeah.
and we've never been able to compete in the landscape of having more than others, whether it be facilities or money or talent. And so the reality has always been here, alignment and unification would be our guiding light to elite success. And, when we've been at our best over our 8 years here, man, it's been magical and it's been really awesome to watch because at the end of the day in football, you still got to play the game. Like the
Mhm.
ball's going to get snapped. There's going to be 11 guys on both sides of the ball, and you're going to have to play the game. And ultimately, the best team still majority of the time, the person and the team that can create the best team can win the football game. And so I've always felt like that's probably been the greatest joy of being at Iowa State is you can build team, you can build culture, you can build unity. And I think it's certainly been a challenging time over the course of the last couple of years as our environment, you're right, as around us has changed. But I really never worry about it or have worried about it so far because I've never felt like it's not allowed us to do our job and not allowed us to still be able to compete and be the team that we want to be and build a team that we believe that can compete for a championship. And as long as those things still allow us to be able to be competitive and still be able to care and love and serve young people, then I really don't worry about all the things that we can't control outside of us. And there is it's a storm. There's a lot going on. There's stuff, but I think you can get so lost in that, and you lose the reality of what my job is. And my job is to recruit 18 to 22-year-old young people, to build a culture where those young people feel confident and safe to grow. And then at the end of it, be great developers of football players to go on the field and win football games. And, I think sometimes what happens is you can get so lost on all the things that, man, you can be mad that it's changing. You can be
Mhm.
mad about this. You can get frustrated about this, but you can't control any of those things. I just want to know, what are the rules?
Yeah.
What's the rules of engagement? How do we make sure whatever those rules are, we're working really hard to make sure we're aligned for Iowa State's best way to be successful? And then yet the rules of the game of football haven't changed.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
still all the same.
Yeah.
It's just everything else around it. And so, it's to me, anytime things are changing around you, it's forcing you to grow too, and forcing us to grow as a university and as athletic department, and certainly as a football program. And I think we have been able to, at least internally as a football program, really try to grow forward through all the things that have come our way over the last couple of years, and not let it debilitate us, but only kind of spit back into building our own culture and our own program, and not weaving off the course of what we've stood for.
So I was going to ask you, what's the key, in the future, let's say the next 10 years,
Mhm.
to still win at Iowa State? And just listening to what you just said there, it sounds pretty similar, right? I mean, don't get off course.
Yeah, don't get off course, and obviously, you got to stay competitive in whatever the environment continues to be around us to, recruit,
Mhm.
retain, and then develop the student athletes that you have. And like I said, so far, I mean, you couldn't be prouder of our ability, and I think it says a lot about the young men we've recruited on the front end. But those guys have stayed, and they've stayed here. And we've been fortunate because I'm sure a lot of guys have stayed and probably could have made a lot more money going other places, but have stayed with us because I think they believe in culture and what we, maybe we can't, equate in financial dollars right now, but we know we can equate in long-term vision and their success of, doubling or tripling that financial value in the long run.
I just too. I don't know as much as you do. I haven't been close to players like you have, but I've been around enough of them, and we all hear about like television, $22 million here, TV, whatever. At the end of the day, these guys want to play though,
Right.
right? Like there's still only so many roster spots to go around. And in your estimation, like if there's 1,000 players, how many of them are just going to take the biggest check going forward compared to actually wanting that opportunity to show themselves on the field. Like, I think we may overplay the money a little bit.
Yeah, well, because I think at the end of the day, you're looking at these are 18 to 22-year-olds, and football is different than any other sport, right? Like in basketball, by the time you're 16, 17, and 18, you've played AAU basketball. You can play 5-on-5 basketball starting really at 6 years old,
Yeah.
and you can play that. So you kind of are fully developed by the time, or close to full development by the time you're 18 in that wheelhouse. Where in football, boy, football is such a developmental game. In high school, the majority of times you're only guaranteed 10 games a season.
Mm-hmm.
In college football, you're guaranteed 12 games. And so and as much as you can go practice, you're still growing and developing, but game development is still the greatest form of development of our sport that you can have. And the reality is our guys are still growing through, their 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 year olds, time in their life. And so it's such a developmental game and a developmental sport that you're exactly right. Playing on the field still matters and is still critical to the future success that, if you want to have a hope to play in the National Football League, man, they're not in the National Football League. They're not paying, again, 32 teams, 50 some roster spots that they're actually paying players to be on their team, and they're not paying for development. They're
No.
paying for the finished product, and they're paying top dollar for the finished product. And so what still matters between 18 and 2 years old is, man, where can I grow, get on the field, develop, and become my best? And who's going to not only, where do I have a chance to play, but where equally do I have a chance to get better, grow, and develop as a football player? And, it can't just be football. You hope that their development is coming because we're getting these young people as young men, and they're in such the critical time in their life where they're growing as men too. So I do think, Chris, what you're saying is, playing time, getting on the field, having the ability to grow and develop, it's so critical in our sport. It's so different. Our sport's so different than everybody else. And that's really the key piece of it is, man, it's a man's game. I mean, it's a game where you are growing to be a 22, 23, 24, 25, 26-year-old man to play professionally in this sport where none of the other sports, you see baseball, young people playing, you say basketball, young people playing professionally. But man, our sports, it's a total different ballgame that way.
The other thing, football, at least your program, it feels a little bit like a throwback to college athletics for me because I grew up in an era where it's like we watch Fred Hoiberg as a freshman and then we watch him as a senior. And women's basketball still has a little bit of that, although the portal's starting to kill that sport as far as watching them come in at 18, watching them leave at 22. Well, that's happening a lot in your program. I think it endears fans to it too. Like a guy like Jalen Knoll is a perfect example. I had to be reminded the other night that he was on that 21 team. Like I didn't even remember that he played on that. But it's like, man, he's been around here a long time. I like that aspect of what you're doing.
Well, that's why I coach. And you go back to your initial question, what do you love about why you're still here and what you're still doing? I mean, to me, the greatest joy that I still get is I've been in one place long enough to where you see guys starting to bring their families back here, and you see players coming back here that were foundational building blocks of the success we've had and some of the opportunities that our guys now are getting the opportunity to have. And where do you get that anymore? I got that growing up in a high school program and a college program, and we're cutting we're losing the fabric of team and culture and identity, and I feel like we haven't lost our way that way. We still have some powerful things here that have allowed us to endear a family and a parents that say, hey, I want my young man to go somewhere where, man, there is some of these cultural residuals. There's some of these opportunities where I know my young man can go there and grow as a football player and as a man. And man, there's former players that are back around that program, and there's guys that are now having success that are pouring back into the program. And it's not just the head coach, but it's everybody involved. And I think we're really fortunate that what we have has helped us. And you're right, being able to keep players here for 4 or 5 years it's always going to be critical to our success. If we ever get to a place where
Mhm.
we're not that, I don't know if you can have success here at Iowa State. I don't know if you can sustain long-term success in terms of 1 year. And, I just don't think that's the way that it'll ever be able to be successful here because, again, financially, we're not going to get into that marketplace and ever be the top bidder. And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to continue to pour into recruiting the right people on the front end, doing a great job of identifying talent, being elite at retention, creating a culture around
Yeah.
us and we've done that with our facilities and we've been able to do that with how we feed our kids, how we train our guys. I think the city of Ames, our fan base, it's different. You got to almost be called here, but if you love it, there's such a great experience available to you. And then the last piece of it is the development is, man, can you develop these players that are coming in here and can you develop them to be some of the best players at their position? And, I would hope 9 years later, the fact is, hey, listen, like you want to play quarterback. Hey, listen, man, there's a pathway. We can show you what that looks like to play elite at the quarterback position, and we can show you a pathway of what it takes to be an elite tailback, and we show you what a pathway at least it looks like to be an elite wide receiver and an elite tight end and an elite defensive lineman and a linebacker, a safety and a corner because they've lived here and
Mhm.
they've had those experiences and they've been developed within the program, and now it's not just you're not just hoping that it can happen. There's an actual pathway of how it can happen.
Do you think that the retention part, because I know how much emphasis you all put on it, is that the equalizer? Because you pull up the internet and it's the portal rankings. Here's who did the best in the portal.
Right.
Whatever school got 12. To me, that would be difficult from a coaching standpoint, from a like chemistry, and you don't really know, right? Like
Right.
it reminds me of the JUCO market back in the 2000s, where people, when I was working at Scout, everybody wanted to know what JUCO you're bringing in February,
Right.
and like those guys hit sometimes,
Sure.
but not nearly as often as the guy who's coming from his sophomore to his junior year.
Right.
Like, do you see that as your equalizer in the new world?
Well, I think it has to be, and again, and that's not to say we won't, occasionally find a really talented transfer here or find a
Yeah.
guy that we recruited along the way. Jalen Travis is a great story for us coming into this fall. He's a kid that we recruited out of high school. He decides to go to Princeton. Man, he's 4 years at Princeton. He's number one in his class at Princeton, and then all of a sudden, man, he's an NFL prospect, and he wants to come back home, and he hit it off with us on the front end of it, and so there's a transfer that
Makes
that's a
sense.
great that makes sense,
Mhm.
and but for us. The majority of our players in our roster, it has to come that way because we can't become a team that's banking on how did your free agency go this past year? Did you get the right free agents, and is that your team? If that's what we're depending on, I think it'll be hard for us to have long-term success. I think we have to be homegrown. We have to do a great job on the front end, and then, like you said, the secret sauce for us has got to be being able to retain those student athletes within our program.
All right, so let's look at the new Big 12. I mean, I love the continuity aspect of your program. I mean, just it's from a staffing standpoint. This league, how is it different now from, let's say, 5 to 6 years ago? Where does Iowa State stack up in this new league going forward in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think the biggest difference is when you take Oklahoma and Texas out, and believe me, you have a lot of respect for both of those programs. I mean, obviously those are very, man, they're going to live a different way of building a football program than we are. And from a talent acquisition standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
they were always going to have, the elite in terms of talent acquisition. But I think, again, even we were able to prove that along the way. Talent acquisition in a 60-minute football game are two different animals. And now I think the way talent acquisition maybe goes across the board in the new Big 12 is everybody's probably on a very similar basis.
I would agree.
And I think, when that happens now, again, how you build your team, how you build your culture, how what the sustainability looks like, how you coach in game, all those things now are probably the deciding factors rather than talent acquisition. And so, I think when you look at it, I it's maybe and I think it's proven to be even whether Texas and Oklahoma were in it or not, top to bottom, the last 2 to 3 years, this has been, man, you better show up and you better bring your A game. And if you don't play football, you're going to get yourself beat no matter who you're playing, no matter what it looked like. And I think it only enhances that way. So I think from a viewership, a competitiveness, you're in a really fascinating time. And when I got into the league, I remember sitting at that first meeting and, you got Bob Stoops at Oklahoma and you got Art Briles at
That
Baylor.
feels like an eternity ago.
It does.
Doesn't it?
You got
Art Briles, man.
you got all those guys sitting there but the top end of it was elite, and the top end of it of Gary Patterson and what TCU was doing, and certainly for us at Iowa State, you were thinking like, holy smokes, how are we even going to have an opportunity to compete with these teams and these players? And I think what we've been able to do is find our pathway. Who are we? How are we going to sustain success at Iowa State? How are we going to push ourselves to get to November and play for championships here at Iowa State football? We've figured that out, and we've proven that. And I think that's the thing that's really exciting. And yet the reality of it is top to bottom, I think you got a lot of teams that have a great identity. They know who they are. They know what they're about. There's really good football across the board in this conference right now. And so I think, yes, we know who we are. And I think, yes, we feel very confident about what we're about. But I think you look across the board and there's very few teams in this conference that don't know who they are or what they're trying to do. So I think it makes for a really exciting conference.
All right, we'll get back to Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell, my conversation with him on the summer series here in just a few minutes. I want to thank another great sponsor, new one to the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network, from Raymond James Financial Advisors Clay and Chase Natuzal. They are really good dudes. I met with these guys, big time Iowa State fans, and Clay has been assisting clients since 1992. That's 32 years of experience. Chase joined that business 3 years ago. He's been in the industry for 5 years. Really, again, these are big time Iowa State fans, and we appreciate them coming onto the podcast network. And we want to help you. Listen, this is a little bit like my friend Hope Wood, who does the wills. Don't necessarily sit there and go, "Oh, I need a financial advisor right now," but at some point you will. And I want you to keep these guys in mind, Clay and Chase Natuzal. I'm going to spell that out for you. And I want you to just go to the Google and I want you to Google them. Raymond James Financial Advisors, Clay and Chase, and it is spelled Netusil. Take you right to their website and get you started today. Last but certainly not least, you got to check out my friends over at Robinson Implement for all of your farm equipment needs, a family-owned business that spans 4 generations, and they've put their customers first. I used to drive a Kubota tractor. Did you know that, Aiden? I did. It was great back when I worked for the city of Clarinda, and they got a lot of them with the 3 locations in Irwin, Pocahontas, and Corning. That's home of the Adams County Speedway in Great Corning, Iowa, one of my favorite places in the world. Friendly people, that is, that staff their parts, service, and sales departments. They are ready to serve you, and they are proud to power the Cyclone Fanatic Summer Series here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network. Don't forget my friends over at the Fairway Meat Market as well. I promise you walk into that Fairway Meat Market up in Ames, and you're going to see they'll have the weirdest contractions of meats, and you're what? Like, I want to eat, and then it's amazing. Fairway Meat Market, it's where the old Wallabies was. Go and check it out if you haven't already. All right, let's go. We'll finish up this conversation with Iowa State head football coach Matt Campbell in our first installment of the summer series here on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network. Does you guys have spent a lot of time in Utah lately on the recruiting trail? Yeah. You've spent a ton of time in Arizona over the years. How does that impact these West Coast schools? Like, do you spend more time there? I'm really curious, just across the board, how much recruiting is going to be changed with that, not only that, but then the whole salary cap thing and everything in general.
And I think to sit here today and have a educated answer on exactly how recruiting is going to change, it would be hard. I still think the reality, though, Chris, comes to how well can you do in your 6 hour radius? Because I still
Yeah.
think your ability to recruit around your campus is so critical to your success. I think I think sometimes a young person having growing up, understanding your program, understanding who you are, willing to work through hard times and stay the course in a program. I think that still all matters. And not to say that you can't, expand your recruiting basis. And believe me, we have. I think we're always going to go national in some areas of our football team to try to find the right fit or the right player for our team. But I also think the reality of if you look at our core foundation, it hasn't changed through NIL or any of these other things. If you look at our recruiting, I'd still say, 65 to 75% of our team is built in a 6 hour radius around Iowa State. And I've always believed that. And I don't think that shifts. I don't think that changes, but I do think it certainly opens up more eyes and other markets to your football program. And, obviously playing out at BYU last year and, being in Salt Lake City and now being out there a year, you're like, geez, man, there's some good football out here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
is this a great area for us that at least they know who Iowa State is and certainly knows about our football program. And, Brock's success in Arizona opened the pathway for us to be able to go down there. And, now you got a kid like Dylan Lee here who all of a sudden is the Gatorade Player of the Year and like, man, a really special
I'm kind of
player,
obsessed with him. I think he's the next
Well, he's exciting,
oh man, I
because
love watching him.
and I know he had a good spring game and all this, but but did you go back and you look at Dylan's background and his history, and it's very similar to Brock, kind of build a team and,
Yeah.
kind of was an anchor of a team that wasn't a traditional powerhouse there and build them into a really successful program. And but for us, you're not going to go sit there and get 6 kids out of Arizona, but can you go get the right one or two guys
Mhm.
and the right one or two guys in Utah? And, this past year you got the number one player out of Utah, the wide receiver that's coming in. And, here's a kid that just ran, 10.5 in track and won the 100. And, all of a sudden now you get this big 6'4" receiver that's coming out of Utah and probably wouldn't have happened a year
Yeah.
ago in this process. And so, I think anytime different pathways open to have viewership and eyes on your program and can identify it, I think those are good things.
What do you think the Big 12 needs to do other than winning? Because that's obviously number one, but to be, like a real behemoth in football, right? Like, because they always throw around it's a basketball league and all this stuff. Like, going forward, the Big 12's got to focus a ton on football. I know it is, but what does the Big 12 need to do, in your opinion? If you had a call to the commissioner, what would you say?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're just in a different time. Like, obviously, with how the landscape's changing around us, football successes matter, and it matters big. I mean, and it's a frontline story to all the things that are changing athletically around us. And obviously the monetization of college athletics, and certainly in the landscape of college football since 1980s, 1990s, when all of this changed. It's certainly the driving force around everything that's going on around us. And so I just say you are right. Like, winning matters, and having success matters, and sustainable success matters. And I certainly think in the Big 12 that's what we're going to have to do, and we're going to have to be able to not only win in our conference but get into the college football playoff and show we can play. And that's the thing I think so exciting for. I even think of our own world, of us, man, playing the Texases and the Oklahomas and the Oregons and being in some of these big games over the last couple of years. I think we've proven, like, at least in our own right, that we can go play with these people and beat these people, and we're going to have to play great football to beat those people. But, I think winning matters. And at the end of the day, can you make sure that you're not creating a student-athlete experience as well that doesn't match what everybody else, at least within the rules, is doing to match the college student-athlete experience at a Big Ten school or an SEC school. Now, above and beyond some of those things, man, that what we can't control, that's not our responsibility. But the things that we can control within the guidelines of the rules, I think we're going to have to do a really good job of committing to that. Because if not, then I do think you'll find a great divide in terms of winning at a high level in playoff atmospheres or championship atmospheres. But again, if you can, within the guidelines of what the rules are, as long as we're able to compete and certainly able to create a student athlete experience that matches that, then I think that, man, you got great coaches. I think you got some great programs in this Big 12 conference that have a chance to compete with anybody.
To the fans listening, I believe Coach and I are going to do this in maybe July, and I'll do a lot more on the roster with him. I guess the last thing I have for you today, we're both pro wrestling fans, I was thinking about this as I was prepping to do this, and these wrestlers, or maybe use a musician, right? Like they all have like different phases of their career. Mm-hmm. Like Hulk Hogan was the ultimate good guy, and then he turned heel on us, and then, or The Rock, he was corporate guy, and then he was the people's champ, whatever. It feels like to me that last year was almost like a different chapter of the Campbell era, in my mind. Mm-hmm. You correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it was like, okay, this downish year, didn't make a bowl game, and then you kind of come out of nowhere with the whole gambling thing that was just a distraction to outsiders, at least, all summer. And you guys surprise a lot of people, win 7 games, have this great season, and now you go into this year where I think on paper I could make an argument that it's as good of a, when I pencil in your starting lineup, as you've had. Maybe not high end, because we'll see. I hope Abu Sama's Brees Hall, right? Like without hindsight, though, I don't know that, but it just seems like we're going into this like new era with you, and that you've been able to ride the wave. A lot of coaches can't do that. What has been the key to getting to this new spot where you guys have such high expectations?
Yeah, well, I would say this. I've chuckled with our staff and our kids at times, and I would probably say this about myself is, we've always been worthy to suffer, and what I mean by that is we've had enough humility, me, us, we, that when we've gone through adversity and hard, that we've had the ability to self-reflect and figure out how do we grow from this and be better from it and not make the same mistakes twice. And, obviously, I feel like we've gone through that, and, this is, we've had the ability to not lose who we want to be and what the foundations have been about building our football program, and yet continue to grow with it. And, we've said this a little bit even coming into this journey. I think when we got here, it was can you really earn the right to believe that you can win here? And it's just like trying to create belief that we can win, and we found a way to do that. And then it was the next phase was, and I think as we did that, along the way, people kind of laughed at you and kind of, it was kind of a little bit of a joke. And then, the next phase of can you sustain success, and
which is the hardest part, right?
Which is the hardest part. And we proved that.
Yep.
And then, we kind of went to that phase of like, man, can you now understand that, yeah, they kind of respect you, but now they're going to try to kill you. And now they're going to fight you every step of the way. And we kind of got into that, and we weren't ready for it. Mm-hmm. And I would probably blame myself on that a little bit. And I think, again, at Iowa State, me and you have talked about this, is with our football program, you have to go through it all the first time. But then you better learn from it, and you better grow from it. And I think what last year created was, and they is a multitude of different things. This is not a pinpointing on anybody. That's just whether it's the teams that you're playing, no matter what it is. And, we kind of got into this phase after 22 of, man, some really hard self-evaluation and reevaluation. And, we didn't really change a whole lot. We just realigned ourselves to the value of who we are and what we have stood for here. And, I remember somebody wrote an article, and one of our players had showed it to me about, going into last season is the culture of Iowa State football is crumbling or whatever it was. Whatever chuckled at it. And the reality was, I've always believed that when it's gotten really hard here, and adversity is hit, you're kind of defined by your culture and who you are. And, I think internally we knew, number one, we were the most aligned we'd been in a long time. We kind of knew who we were after 7 years of the team. And yes, man, there was chaos going on around us. But I think internally we were like, man, we have one of the most talented groups we've ever had. We're just really young and we lack experience. And, it was almost like watching us go through those early stages, which we knew we were going to have happen, and then watch this team start to take off.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, you're going into the third piece of it, because as I told our kids, when we are willing to want to kill and fight back, then we will win and powerful things are going to happen. And we're kind of, I think, starting to understand some of those things. And I think as a staff and players, and, I think one of the really neat things about last year was, the most adversity probably we've ever had, and any group of players that I've ever dealt with, and the amount of young people that were forced to respond to that adversity and how they did it. It was really rewarding, and probably one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had as a coach.
One of my favorite seasons I've ever
For sure
been around.
For sure. And I think what it did for us is it like I said, not only have we sprinted back here in the summer, I mean, even from January on, and probably the most poetic way of, disappointing, didn't play our best in the bowl game, lose the bowl game, but almost like, almost the right recipe for this team to come back in January and say, here's where we are,
Mm-hmm.
here's what it is, and here's where we need to go. And is everybody willing to go there? Because these are the things we can actually put into reality, what's happening and where we're trying to go. And it's been so fun to watch these guys rally together as one and really have a great off season. And you're right, it's an exciting time, because I think not only it's not make believe. You've got guys that you saw have success, but they have had success, and they're a group that they know who they are and they know what they stand for and the character. And I mean, I know, sometimes everybody laughs like, but you even look at the academics, and that's a small thing, but you're talking 109 guys with over a 3.0 GPA, a team GPA of 3.35, and a cumulative GPA. I mean, it's a smart, committed football team, and that's committed to excellence in everything they do.
Yeah, isn't that contagious though? Like, because if they're not.
Yeah, because isn't it life, Chris, right? Like, and I know I've said this forever, like how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, we know that. I mean, I feel like I almost catch myself saying that to myself, and man, how I eat, how I take care of myself. Do I get up early? Am I willing to stay the course in my own process? Like, we're all continuing to try to do that. As parents, I think we're trying to teach our young
don't
children
take shortcuts.
that, right?
Yeah.
And it's no different than what you're teaching 18 to 22-year-old young men that are trying to do something profoundly incredible. And so, yeah, I think all those things still matter. And unfortunately, sometimes we're in a world where it's so transactional that we want to make it about this, or we want to make it about that. But like, not in college football, because you're still going to school, you're still taking classes, you're still being defined by who you become through your journey between 18 and 22 years old. And man, what happens in your 4 to 5 years as a college student athlete are still going to define the next 40 to 50 years of your life, the type of life you live, who you marry, what kind of success you have, what kind of father and husband you become. It still is defining that. And yet we get lost in this world of the mirage of $22 million here and all this NIL stuff here and all this stuff. And it's easy to get lost. It's easy to get lost down the road. But I think what we've tried to do is really kind of zero things back into what's going on presently and the opportunity to become your best. And, we're really fortunate to have great kids right now.
Well, I appreciate the time, because like I said, I think even in my position, we can get lost in all the crap.
Yeah.
And it's eye-opening, and it's good for the audience too, to hear talk like this and talk about actual football in the summer. And it feels like COVID on, it's just been nonstop.
Yeah.
With just crap.
Well,
And I'm really excited for this summer because I think we're going to be able to talk a lot of football.
Well, we look forward to it, and again, my gratefulness is to you, Chris, who's always covered us, and I've said this for forever. I mean, our alignment from our fan base, and it's what's special about Iowa State is if you are going to do something really special, everybody's got to be pulling in the same direction. And from day one, you've always done that for us, and I'm grateful. And to our fans and our supporters, we're really grateful. We look forward to making everybody really proud of this football team this fall.
Appreciate you, buddy.
All right, appreciate
Go enjoy
your
your
time.
summer.
All right, thanks so much.
Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell here on the Summer Series.